Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the massive viewing window of the Galactic Council station, watching the swirling nebula that painted the void in brilliant purples and blues. After 15 years representing humanity in this cosmic bureaucracy, she had grown tired of the endless debates that led nowhere. Today would be different. Today, humanity would make a statement that would echo across the galaxy. The council chamber buzzed with the usual cacophony of alien voices. Representatives from 237 species filled the amphitheater-like space, their forms ranging from the elegant Altarian crystals that chimed when they spoke to the massive Gornith delegates who communicated through bioluminescent patterns across their beetle-like shells. Sarah had learned to navigate this maze of cultures and customs, but she had also learned something else. Humanity was not welcome here as an equal partner. The motion before us today, announced Council Speaker Vorthak, his 6 arms gesturing dramatically as his translator collar converted his clicks and whistles in his standard galactic, concerns the human request for expanded mining rights in the Kepler sector. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. This was the 14th time humanity had requested access to expand their resource-gathering operations. Each time, the Council found new reasons to deny them. Too aggressive, too unpredictable, too young a species to handle such responsibility. The excuses never ended. The Zephyrian delegate, a floating jellyfish-like being enclosed in a water-filled sphere, pulsed a soft blue. The Zephyrian Collective maintains that granting humans additional resource access would upset the delicate balance we have maintained for centuries. Their species has shown concerning tendencies toward rapid expansion and territorial behavior. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Sarah had heard these same arguments countless times. The irony wasn't lost on her that many of these species had built their own empires through conquest and expansion, yet they now preached restraint to humanity. The Karathi representative, resembling a large mantis with golden exoskeleton plates, clicked his mandibles. Furthermore, human military buildup continues to concern the Inner Council. No species requires such extensive defensive capabilities for purely peaceful expansion. Sarah stood, her movement causing several nearby delegates to shift nervously. Humans had a reputation for being unpredictable, and her species' emotional expressions often made other races uncomfortable. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "Humanity appreciates the Council's continued deliberation on our requests. However, I must ask, what exactly would satisfy the Council regarding human expansion rights?" Speaker Vorthak's eye stalks swiveled toward her. "Ambassador Chun, surely you understand that each species must prove their readiness for expanded privileges within our galactic community. And how does one prove readiness?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer would be another non-answer. The ethereal delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline framework, shimmered with what Sarah had learned indicated condescension. "The Council evaluates numerous factors: cultural stability, economic integration, demonstration of peaceful intent, and adherence to galactic law." Sarah nodded slowly. "I see. And in humanity's case, what specific benchmarks must we meet?" The chamber fell silent. This was the question that had never been directly answered in 15 years of diplomatic relations. Sarah watched as delegates exchanged glances, their various forms of communication creating a subtle symphony of lights, sounds, and chemical signals. "The benchmarks," Speaker Vorthak said carefully, "are evaluated on a case-by-case basis by the Inner Council." "The Inner Council," Sarah repeated. "The same group that has never included a human representative, despite humanity's requests for inclusion dating back 12 years. The tension in the chamber was now palpable. Several delegates had begun displaying what Sarah recognized as signs of agitation. The Gornith were flashing warning patterns, the Altarian chimes had taken on a discordant note, and the Zephyrians had deepened to an angry red. "Ambassador Chun," the Karathi delegate interjected, "surely you're not questioning the wisdom of our established procedures?" Sarah looked around the chamber, taking in the faces and forms of beings representing civilizations that span the galaxy. Some were ancient beyond human comprehension, others were relative newcomers like humanity. But all of them, she realized, had been granted the opportunities that humanity was consistently denied. "I'm questioning," she said slowly, "whether humanity's place in this council serves any purpose beyond providing a token gesture of inclusivity." The chamber erupted. Delegates began speaking over each other in dozens of languages and communication methods. Speaker Vorthax, 6 arms waved frantically as he called for order. "Ambassador Chun," he shouted over the din. "Such accusations are inappropriate and unfounded." "Are they?" Sarah activated her personal communication device, projecting a holographic display visible to the entire chamber. 15 years of diplomatic relations. 473 formal requests for expansion rights, trade agreements, and resource access. 7 approved. That's a success rate of less than 1.5%. The chamber quieted as delegates studied the data. Sarah continued. For comparison, the Valdorian Empire was granted 37 expansion rights in their first decade of council membership. The hegemony of Proxima received trade agreements worth trillions of credits within 5 years of joining. Even the Crystalline Confederacy, which joined the council only 8 years ago, has been granted more resource access than humanity. The Valdorian delegate, a reptilian being with iridescent scales, hissed softly. The circumstances of each species' integration are unique. Humanity's aggressive nature requires careful consideration. "Aggressive nature," Sarah repeated. "Let me share some more data with the council." Her holographic display shifted to show military statistics. In the past 15 years, humanity has engaged in exactly 0 aggressive actions against council member species. 0 territorial disputas. 0 trade conflicts that escalated to hostilities. In contrast, 17 council member species have engaged in armed conflicts with each other during the same period. The ethereal delegate flickered with annoyance. Such statistics lack context. Humanity's potential for aggression is based on observed behavioral patterns and historical analysis. "Historical analysis," Sarah said. "You mean the conflicts that occurred before humanity achieved faster-than-light travel? Before we encountered galactic civilization? Conflicts that ended over a century ago." The patterns of behavior ingrained in a species do not change simply because they develop space travel. The Zephyrian delegate pulsed orange with conviction. Sarah felt something inside her snap. 15 years of patient diplomacy, of careful word choice, of swallowing insults, and maintaining professionalism despite constant condescension and discrimination. She thought of the colonies back home, struggling with limited resources because their expansion requests were denied. She thought of human scientists whose research proposals were rejected by galactic institutions. She thought of human traders forced to accept disadvantageous deals because they lacked access to the inner circles of galactic commerce. "I have a question for this council," she said, her voice carrying a new edge. "Is there any scenario in which humanity would be granted full membership rights and equal treatment?" The silence that followed was telling. Delegates avoided eye contact, their various forms of body language all conveying the same message: discomfort with the direct question. Speaker Vorthax Istox swiveled nervously. "Ambassador Chun, full membership is a complex process that requires yes or no," Sarah interrupted. "Is there any realistic scenario in which this council would grant humanity equal status?" The pause that followed stretched for nearly a minute. "The council believes that humanity's current associate status provides appropriate representation for a species of your developmental stage." "Our developmental stage," Sarah said. "We've developed faster-than-light travel, established colonies on dozens of worlds, created a stable interstellar government, and contributed to galactic scientific knowledge in numerous fields. What developmental stage would qualify us for full membership?" Again, silence. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. When she opened them, Her resolve was absolute. "I hereby formally request," she announced, "that the Council provide a clear timeline and specific requirements." After 15 years of similar delays, she knew exactly what that meant. "In that case," she said, reaching into her diplomatic case, "I have something to deliver to this Council." She withdrew a sealed document, its official human government seals clearly visible. The chamber fell completely silent as she walked to the center of the speaking area. "By the authority granted to me by the United Earth Government and the Colonial Administration Council," she announced, "I hereby deliver formal notice of humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, effective immediately." The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates were on their feet, or floating, or whatever their species did when agitated. The terms are outlined in detail, but the summary is simple. Humanity is terminating all formal diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council and its member species. The ethereal delegate flickered rapidly with what Sarah had learned indicated extreme distress. "You cannot simply leave. There are procedures, obligations, treaties, all of which are addressed in the withdrawal notice," Sarah said. "Humanity will honor existing trade agreements until their expiration dates, provide 60 days notice before closing our embassy facilities, and maintain minimal communication for the orderly transition of any ongoing cooperative projects." The Zephyrian delegate had turned a deep purple, which Sarah knew meant panic. But the mining operations, the research projects, the trade routes through human space will all be terminated or transferred to human control as outlined in our existing agreements, Sarah confirmed. "Any Council member species wishing to continue individual relationships with humanity may negotiate directly with our government, but humanity will no longer participate in Council activities or recognize Council authority." The Valdorian delegate's scales had shifted to an aggressive red pattern. "You cannot do this. Human space serves as a crucial link between the inner and outer rim territories." "That's humanity's problem now," Sarah replied. "We'll manage our space as we see fit." Speaker Vorthak was frantically consulting with his advisors. "Ambassador Chun, surely we can discuss this reasonably. Perhaps some accommodations could be made." 15 years too late for that conversation," Sarah interrupted. "The decision is final and non-negotiable." The Karathi delegate's mandibles were clicking rapidly with agitation. "The economic disruption alone will affect dozens of species. Trillions of credits in trade flow through human space. Then, perhaps the Council should have considered that before treating humanity as a second-class member for 15 years, Sarah said. She began walking toward the chamber exit, but Speaker Vorthak's voice stopped her. "Where are you going? We need to discuss the implications of this decision." Sarah turned back to face the chamber. 236 delegates from across the galaxy stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to anger to what she could only interpret as fear. "I'm going home," she said simply. "My diplomatic mission here is complete." "But the transition process," the ethereal delegate flickered frantically. "The protocols, the procedures, are all outlined in the withdrawal notice," Sarah repeated. "Humanity has fulfilled its obligations to provide formal notice and documentation. Good day, delegates." As she walked out of the chamber, Sarah could hear the explosion of voices behind her. For the first time in 15 years, she smiled. Let them panic. Let them scramble. Let them figure out how to maintain their precious galactic civilization without humanity's resources, technology, and strategic position. The corridors of the Council Station seemed different as Sarah made her way to the human embassy section. Other species representatives she passed looked at her with new expressions. Word was already spreading. The humans had done the unthinkable. They had walked away. At the embassy, her staff was already preparing for departure. News of the withdrawal had been transmitted to Earth simultaneously with her announcement, and the response had been immediate. Pack everything up and come home. "Ambassador," her aide Marcus Johnson said as she entered the main office, "we're receiving communication requests from dozens of Council member species. They want to establish direct diplomatic channels. Route them all to Earth, Sarah replied. Individual species are welcome to negotiate with humanity directly, but we're done with the Council as an institution. Ma'am, her communications officer Linda Park called from across the room. We're also getting some interesting intelligence reports. Apparently, several Council member species are calling emergency sessions. The economic implications of our withdrawal are significant. Sarah wasn't surprised. Humanity controlled some of the most efficient trade routes in the galaxy, and human space served as a crucial bridge between different regions. More importantly, humanity had become a major supplier of rare minerals and technological innovations, despite the Council's restrictions. How significant? She asked. Linda consulted her displays. Preliminary estimates suggest that closure of human space to Council traffic could increase shipping costs by 30 to 40% for trade between the inner and outer rim. Several species that depend on human-supplied rare earth elements for their technology are already expressing concern about supply shortages. And our military withdrawal from Council peacekeeping operations? That's causing even more panic, Marcus reported. Apparently, human forces have been involved in maintaining security for several trade routes and border regions. The Council is going to have to find alternatives quickly. Sarah nodded. Humanity had never been given full recognition for their contributions to galactic stability, but those contributions were about to become painfully obvious in their absence. Her personal communicator chimed with an incoming message. The sender ID made her raise an eyebrows. It was from the Altarian Trade Consortium, one of the galaxy's largest commercial organizations. The message was brief, but telling. The Altarian Consortium wishes to open immediate negotiations for continuation of trade relationships with humanity outside Council framework. We believe mutually beneficial arrangements can be reached. Interesting, Sarah murmured. Within hours of the withdrawal announcement, one of the galaxy's major economic powers was already reaching out to establish direct relations. Over the next few hours, similar messages began arriving from other species and organizations. The hegemony of Proxima wanted to discuss maintaining their joint research projects. The Crystalline Confederacy was interested in direct mineral trade agreements. Even some of the inner Council species were quietly inquiring about bilateral relations. By the end of the day, Sarah had received contact requests from 43 different groups, ranging from individual corporations to entire governments. The message was clear. Whatever the Council's official position, the galaxy's major players weren't willing to lose access to humanity's resources and strategic position. Ma'am, Linda called out, we're receiving a priority transmission from Speaker Vorthak's office. He's requesting an urgent meeting. Denied, Sarah replied without hesitation. We have nothing further to discuss with Council leadership. He's claiming this could destabilize the entire galactic economy. Then perhaps the Council should have thought of that before spending 15 years treating humanity as expendable. As the embassy staff continued their packing operations, Sarah found herself back at the viewing window, watching the nebula that had been her view for so many years. Tomorrow, she would board a human transport and leave this place forever. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when they took humanity for granted. And somehow, Sarah suspected the lesson would be more expensive than anyone imagined. Her communicator chimed again. This time, the sender made her pause. It was from the Valdorian Empire's Economic Ministry, not their Council representative. Ambassador Chun. The message read, the Valdorian Empire wishes to discuss immediate establishment of bilateral trade agreements to replace current Council-mediated arrangements. We are prepared to offer terms significantly more favorable than current agreements. Sarah smiled. The rats were already abandoning ship, and humanity hadn't even finished packing yet. Outside the window, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the political upheaval beginning to ripple across the galaxy. But Sarah knew that by tomorrow, the universe would be a very different place. The humans were going home, and for the first time in 15 years, They were going home as equals, whether the Galactic Council liked it or not. The panic, Sarah realized, was just beginning 3 weeks after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council. The ripple effects were turning into tidal waves. President Elena Vasquez stood in the Situation Room beneath the United Earth Government Complex, surrounded by holographic displays showing the chaos spreading across known space. "Show me the trade route analysis again," she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of leading humanity through its most significant diplomatic crisis in over a century. Admiral Rebecca Torres, head of Earth Strategic Command, manipulated the three-dimensional display. Golden lines representing trade routes crisscrossed the galaxy, but now many of those lines were pulsing red. "As you can see, Madam President," Admiral Torres explained, "closing human space to Council-authorized traffic has created severe bottlenecks. The Kepler-Vega route, which carries approximately 30% of inner rim to outer rim commerce, now requires a detour that adds 14 days to shipping times and increases fuel costs by 60%. Secretary of Commerce David Kim stepped forward, consulting his tablet. "We're receiving dozens of requests daily from commercial entities wanting to negotiate direct passage rights. The Centauri Shipping Guild alone is offering us a 50 billion credit annual fee just for priority access to our space lanes." President Vasquez nodded grimly. She had expected the economic impact to be significant, but the speed and severity of the crisis had surprised even her administration's most pessimistic projections. "What about the military situation?" she asked. Admiral Torres switched the display to show fleet positions. "Here's where things get interesting. The Council has been scrambling to replace human peacekeeping forces in 12 different sectors. They've managed partial coverage in 8 sectors, but the remaining 4 are essentially undefended. Undefended. The Karathi have moved forces to cover the Altair border region, but they're spread thin. The Zephyrians are trying to maintain order in the frontier zones, but their fleet composition isn't suited for that kind of patrol work. And nobody wants to take responsibility for the neutral territories." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, humanities chief xenobiologist and former cultural attaché, spoke up from her position near the display. "We're also seeing interesting political developments. At least 6 council member species have submitted formal requests to their own governments asking for permission to establish direct diplomatic relations with us." President Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "Which species?" "The Altarians formally requested permission yesterday. The Valdorians have apparently been debating it for 2 weeks. The hegemony of Proxima is being more subtle about it, but their economic ministry has been in regular contact with our trade representatives. Even some of the inner council species are quietly exploring options." "The ethereals?" Dr. Mitchell shook her head. "No, they're holding firm with the council position. Same with the Gornith. But the Crystalline Confederacy has been very receptive to continuing our joint research projects outside the council framework." Secretary Kim looked up from his tablet. "Speaking of research projects, we need to discuss the implications of withdrawing from the Galactic Scientific Consortium. Several of our long-term research initiatives were funded through council programs." President Vasquez had been dreading this conversation. "What are we looking at?" "The Fusion Efficiency Project will lose about 40% of its funding. The Terraforming Research Program will lose 60%. And the Exotic Matter Studies Program." Kim posed that one was almost entirely council-funded. Admiral Torres stepped forward. "Madam President, I'd like to point out that while we're losing some research funding, we're also no longer obligated to share our research with council member species. Some of our most advanced technologies have been freely shared with the galaxy for the past 15 years. Meaning we can now classify previously shared research and use it for our own strategic advantage. Our quantum communication technology, for instance, has been helping council species coordinate their fleets. Our advanced metallurgy research has been used to improve their ship hulls. Our medical research has been distributed to dozens of species." President Vasquez sat down heavily in her chair. The decision to withdraw from the council had been necessary, but the implications were staggering. What's the domestic situation? She asked. Secretary Kim pulled up another set of data. Surprisingly positive. The colonies are overwhelmingly supportive of the withdrawal. Colonial governors report that morale has improved significantly now that expansion restrictions have been lifted. Mining operations that were blocked by council environmental regulations are back online. Several colonies are already planning new settlement projects. And Earth itself? Mixed but trending positive. Initial concerns about economic isolation have been offset by the flood of direct trade offers from other species. The public seems to view the withdrawal as long overdue. Dr. Mitchell added, there's also a significant psychological component. For 15 years, humanity has been treated as junior partners in galactic civilization. The withdrawal has been widely perceived as standing up for human dignity and equality. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Admiral Torres checked the communication panel, and her expression became grim. Madam President, we have a developing situation. Long-range sensors are detecting unusual fleet movements in the neutral territories. What kind of movements? It appears to be the Ravager Coalition. 3 battle fleets moving toward the Kepler sector. The room fell silent. The Ravagers were a loose alliance of species that rejected galactic civilization entirely, preferring to raid and pillage frontier worlds. For decades, Council peacekeeping forces had kept them confined to the outer edges of known space. How big? President Vasquez asked. Approximately 200 combat vessels, mostly heavy cruisers and assault ships. It's the largest Ravager force seen in over a decade. Secretary Kim looked up from his tablet. The Kepler sector, that's where our mining operations are located. 17 human colonies, including New Geneva and Port Darwin. President Vasquez felt her blood run cold. How long before they reach human space? At current speed, approximately 4 days. But, Madam President, they might not be targeting us directly. The Kepler sector also includes colonies from 6 other council member species. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward. This can't be a coincidence. The Ravagers have been contained for years. They wouldn't risk this kind of major offensive unless something had changed. Admiral Torres nodded grimly. They know the Council's peacekeeping forces are spread thin because of our withdrawal. This is exactly the kind of opportunity they've been waiting for. What forces do we have in the region? President Vasquez asked. The 3rd Fleet is stationed at New Geneva. Admiral Chun has 18 heavy cruisers, 36 frigates, and support vessels. It's a strong force, but not enough to handle 200 Ravager ships alone. And Council forces? The nearest Council peacekeeping fleet is 6 days away, and it's only about half the size of our 3rd Fleet. President Vasquez stood and began pacing. This was exactly the scenario she had hoped to avoid. Humanity's withdrawal was supposed to be a clean break, allowing them to pursue their own path without getting entangled in galactic conflicts. But the reality of interstellar politics was proving more complicated. Options? She asked. Admiral Torres activated the tactical display. Option 1. We evacuate our colonies in the Kepler sector and let the Council deal with the Ravagers. It would take about 3 days to evacuate civilian populations, but we'd lose significant infrastructure and mining operations. Option 2. We reinforce the 3rd Fleet and defend our territory. I can have the 2nd and 5th Fleets there in 2 days if we push their engines. Combined, we have enough firepower to handle the Ravager force. And Option 3? Dr. Mitchell asked. Admiral Torres looked uncomfortable. Option 3 is we coordinate with Council forces to mount a joint defense. It would be the most effective military solution, but it would require reopening communication with the Council. President Vasquez continued pacing. Each option had significant drawbacks. Evacuation would be seen as weakness and would cost humanity billions of credits in lost infrastructure. Unilateral defense would work militarily, but would signal that humanity was willing to go it alone even in major conflicts. And coordination with the Council would undermine the entire withdrawal. There's a 4th option, Secretary Kim said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. We could use this as leverage. The Council needs our help to deal with this threat. We could offer to intervene in exchange for formal recognition of our withdrawal terms and guarantees about future treatment. Dr. Mitchell shook her head. That's essentially blackmail, using civilian lives as bargaining chips. Is it? Kim countered. Or is it using our military capabilities to negotiate a better position for humanity? The Council took our contributions for granted for 15 years. Maybe it's time they learned to value what we bring to the table. Admiral Torres looked thoughtful. There is precedent. The Valdorian Empire used similar tactics during their border disputes with the hegemony. They provided military assistance in exchange for favorable trade agreements. President Vasquez stopped pacing. What exactly would we demand? Recognition of humanity's right to control our own space, Kim replied. Formal acknowledgement that human territory is sovereign and not subject to Council authority. And perhaps most importantly, a commitment that any future relationship between humanity and the Council will be as equals, not as junior partners. And if they refuse, then we defend our colonies alone and let the Council deal with the aftermath. Either way, we're not going back to being second-class members of galactic civilization. President Vasquez considered this for a long moment. It was a risky strategy, but it might be their best chance to establish humanity's new position in the galaxy. Admiral Torres, how confident are you that our forces can handle the Ravager fleet? With proper reinforcement? Very confident. Our ships are technologically superior to Ravager vessels, and our tactical doctrine is specifically designed for fighting numerically superior forces. The main risk would be civilian casualties if any Ravager ships break through to attack colonies directly. Dr. Mitchell, what's your assessment of Council reaction if we offer conditional assistance? The xenobiologist considered carefully. They're already panicking about the economic implications of our withdrawal. If the Ravager situation escalates, they'll be facing a military crisis on top of the economic disruption. They might be more willing to negotiate than usual. Secretary Kim, draft a proposal. Humanitarian assistance and military cooperation in exchange for formal recognition of human sovereignty and equal status in any future diplomatic arrangements. Yes, Madam President. Admiral Torres, begin moving the 2nd and 5th fleets toward the Kepler sector, but keep them one day out from the combat zone. We'll present the Council with a choice. Accept our terms and receive our help, or face the Ravagers without us. As her staff began implementing her orders, President Vasquez returned to the tactical display. The red dots representing Ravager forces continued their inexorable advance toward human space and the colonies of 6 other species. In 3 days, she would find out whether humanity's gamble would pay off or whether the withdrawal from the Council would lead to the first major interstellar conflict involving human forces in over a century. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn that humanity would no longer be taken for granted. The President's communicator chimed with an urgent message. Speaker Vorthak was requesting immediate communication with Earth's leadership. President Vasquez smiled grimly. The panic was spreading, and humanity was about to find out just how much leverage they really had. Put him through, she ordered. Let's see what the Council is willing to offer for our help. The conversation that followed would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. But for the first time in 15 years, humanity would be negotiating from a position of strength. The humans were no longer just walking away from the table. They were about to flip it over entirely. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called at 0300 Standard Galactic Time, and Speaker Vorthak could feel the panic radiating from every delegate in the chamber. The holographic display at the center of the amphitheater showed the advancing Ravager fleets in stark red, their trajectory toward the Kepler sector leaving no doubt about their intentions. The situation is critical, announced Admiral Zykoth of the Karathi Defense Forces, his mandibles clicking rapidly with agitation. Our intelligence suggests this is the largest Ravager offensive in 50 years. They have deployed siege vessels, planetary bombardment ships, and what appears to be new technology we haven't seen before. The Zephyrian delegate pulsed a deep orange, which Vorthak knew indicated extreme distress. The nearest Council peacekeeping force is 6 days away from the Kepler sector. The colonies there will be defenseless. Not entirely defenseless, corrected the Valdorian representative, her scales shifting to worried patterns. The human Third Fleet is stationed in that sector. 18 heavy cruisers and support vessels. An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. The humans. 3 weeks ago, they had stormed out of this very room, and now they were the only thing standing between the Ravager horde and 17 human colonies, plus settlements from 6 council member species. Speaker Vorthak's eye stalks swiveled nervously. Have there been any communications from the human forces in the sector? Admiral Zykoth consulted his tactical displays. Admiral Chun of the Human Third Fleet transmitted a standard alert to all colonies in the region, warning of the approaching threat. She has not requested assistance, nor has she indicated what action she intends to take. The ethereal delegate flickered with what Vorthak recognized as barely contained anxiety. 18 human ships cannot hold off 200 Ravager vessels. The tactical mathematics are impossible. Unless, the Crystalline Confederacy representative chimed with crystalline harmonics, they do not intend to fight. The implication hung heavy in the chamber. Would humanity defend colonies that weren't their own? Or would they evacuate their own people and leave council member species to face the Ravagers alone? There is another factor to consider, Admiral Zykoth said grimly. Our long-range sensors have detected additional human fleet movements. Large formations leaving Earth space and heading toward the Kepler sector. Speaker Vorthak felt his twin hearts skip a beat. How large? Approximately 60 additional vessels. 2 full battle fleets. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. That was more than enough firepower to handle the Ravager threat. But why were the humans reinforcing a sector they had seemingly abandoned along with the rest of galactic civilization? Speaker Vorthak called out the aide at his communication station. We have an incoming priority transmission from Earth. President Vasquez wishes to address the council. The chamber fell silent. This would be the first official communication from Earth's government since the withdrawal. Put her through, Vorthak ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. The main display shifted to show President Elena Vasquez, seated in what appeared to be a military command center. Behind her, tactical displays showed fleet positions and battle projections. Speaker Vorthak esteemed delegates. She began, her tone formal but not unfriendly. I understand the Council is dealing with a crisis in the Kepler sector. President Vasquez. Vorthak replied carefully. The Galactic Council appreciates your willingness to communicate during this difficult time. Yes, we are facing an unprecedented Ravager offensive that threatens colonies from multiple species, including human settlements. I'm aware of the threat, Vasquez said. I'm also aware that Council peacekeeping forces are currently unable to respond in time to prevent significant casualties and infrastructure damage. The Karathi delegate leaned forward. President Vasquez, surely human forces will defend their own colonies? Admiral Chun has been given full authority to protect human lives and interests, Vasquez replied. However, I wanted to discuss the broader situation with the Council. Speaker Vorthak felt a glimmer of hope. We are grateful for any assistance humanity might provide. I'm prepared to authorize full human military intervention against the Ravager threat, Vasquez said. Our reinforcement fleets can be on station within 36 hours, and our combined forces are more than sufficient to defeat the Ravager offensive. The relief in the chamber was palpable. Several delegates began speaking at once, expressing gratitude and asking about coordination procedures. President Vasquez held up a hand for silence. However, this assistance comes with conditions. The chamber went quiet again. Speaker Vorthak felt his hope beginning to curdle into dread. What conditions? He asked. First, The Galactic Council will formally recognize humanity's withdrawal from the Council as valid and permanent. No attempts will be made to pressure humanity to rejoin or to claim authority over human space. The ethereal delegate flickered rapidly. That may be difficult to arrange. The Council's charter has provisions for— I'm not interested in charter provisions, Vasquez interrupted. I'm stating the terms for human military assistance. Accept them or deal with the Ravagers yourselves. Speaker Vorthak exchanged glances with several other delegates. The charter did indeed have provisions preventing unilateral withdrawal, but those provisions had never been tested because no species had ever tried to leave before. What other conditions? He asked. Second, any council member species that wishes to maintain individual diplomatic and trade relationships with humanity may do so without council interference. Humanity will no longer be treated as a collective entity that must be approached through council channels. The Valdorian delegate's scales shifted to thoughtful patterns. That would essentially recognize human space as sovereign territory, equal to any council member nation. Exactly, Vasquez confirmed. And third, the council will publicly acknowledge humanity's contributions to galactic security and stability over the past 15 years, including the role human forces have played in maintaining peace in regions the Council has now proven unable to protect. Admiral Zykov clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. These terms would fundamentally alter the relationship between the Council and humanity. That's the point, Vasquez said. Humanity is done being treated as a junior partner in galactic affairs. We're prepared to be helpful neighbors and allies, but we're not going back to being second-class members of your organization. Speaker Vorthak conferred quickly with his advisors. The tactical situation was clear. Without human intervention, the Kepler sector would fall to the Ravagers, resulting in massive casualties and potentially encouraging further Ravager aggression throughout the frontier regions. President Vasquez, he said carefully, these are significant changes to established protocols. The Council would need time to debate and vote. You have 2 hours, Vasquez interrupted. After that, the Ravager forces will be close enough to the colonies that our intervention becomes much more costly in terms of civilian casualties. 2 hours is insufficient time for proper deliberation. Then, I suggest you prioritize, Vasquez said. The human fleets are standing by, but they won't wait indefinitely. Make your choice, Speaker Vorthak. Accept our terms and save the colonies, or maintain your bureaucratic procedures and explain to the survivors why their lives were less important than protocol. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The Zephyrian delegate was pulsing rapid sequences of color that Vorthak knew indicated intense distress. She cannot make such demands. The precedent would be catastrophic. The precedent of survival, asked the Crystalline Confederacy representative. Because that's what we're discussing here. Admiral Zykov was studying his tactical displays. I have updated projections from our fleet commanders. Even if we could get our peacekeeping forces to the Kepler sector immediately, we would suffer severe casualties attempting to engage a force this size. The humans are offering to handle the entire threat with minimal risk to their own forces, at the cost of recognizing their complete independence, the Karathi delegate pointed out. Independence they have already claimed, the Valdorian representative countered. We're not giving them anything they haven't already taken. We're simply acknowledging reality in exchange for saving millions of lives. The ethereal delegate flickered with what Vorthak had learned to recognize as deep consideration. There's another factor to consider. If we refuse and the colonies are destroyed, how will member species react? Many of them have already been privately exploring direct relationships with humanity. Speaker Vorthak felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. In 50 years of leading the Council, he had never faced a choice this stark. Compromise core principles or watch millions of sentient beings die. We need to consider each term individually, he announced. First, recognition of humanity's withdrawal as valid and permanent. What are the implications? The Council's chief legal advisor, a floating crystalline entity from the ethereal collective, shimmered thoughtfully. Legally complex but manageable. The charter's withdrawal provisions were designed to prevent chaos, but they assumed withdrawal would be gradual and negotiated. Human withdrawal has been orderly and well documented. We could classify it as a unique circumstance. Second term, allowing individual diplomatic relationships without council oversight. More problematic, the legal advisor admitted. It would establish precedent for any council member species to engage in independent foreign policy. The Valdorian delegate hissed softly. Many species already do so informally. This would simply make it official. And the third term, public acknowledgement of human contributions to galactic security. Admiral Zykoth consulted his records. Actually, this is simply factual. Human forces have been involved in peacekeeping operations in 12 sectors, anti-piracy campaigns in 8 regions, and border security for 6 different species. They have contributed more to galactic stability than many inner council members. Speaker Vorthak looked around the chamber. The mathematics of the situation were becoming clear. Accepting humanity's terms would preserve the lives of millions of colonists and potentially prevent a broader Ravager offensive that could destabilize the entire frontier region. I call for an emergency vote, he announced. All in favor of accepting humanity's terms in exchange for military assistance against the Ravager threat. The voting process took less than 10 minutes. When it was over, the result was overwhelming. 187 in favor, 23 opposed, 26 abstentions. The motion carries. Speaker Vorthak announced. Transmit acceptance of terms to President Vasquez immediately. As the communication was being established, Admiral Zykoth looked up from his displays with something approaching admiration. Speaker Vorthak, he said, I'm receiving confirmation that human reinforcement fleets have already begun acceleration toward the Kepler sector. They were moving before we even responded. The implications were clear. Humanity had been confident the Council would accept their terms. They had played the entire situation perfectly, leveraging the crisis to establish their independence while simultaneously demonstrating their value as allies. President Vasquez appeared on the display again, and this time she was smiling. Speaker Vorthak, I've received confirmation of the Council's acceptance. Human forces are already en route to engage the Ravager threat. You should have confirmation of successful interdiction within 48 hours. President Vasquez, Vorthak said, humanity's assistance in this crisis is deeply appreciated. I hope this can be the beginning of a new relationship between our peoples. So do I, Vasquez replied. But understand that this relationship will be between equals. Humanity is no longer a supplicant seeking council approval. We're a sovereign power offering partnership to those who treat us with respect. After the transmission ended, Speaker Vorthak sat quietly in his chair, considering what had just occurred. In less than 4 hours, humanity had leveraged a military crisis to completely reshape their relationship with galactic civilization. They had not merely left the Council. They had forced the galaxy to recognize them as an equal power, capable of acting independently and demanding respect. The Ravager crisis would be resolved within days, but its implications would reshape galactic politics for decades to come. Humanity had walked out of the Council chamber 3 weeks ago as frustrated junior partners. Today, they had walked back in as equals who could not be ignored. And somehow, Speaker Vorthak suspected this was only the beginning of the changes humanity would bring to the galaxy. The humans, it seemed, were done asking for permission to be Great Admiral Sarah. Chun stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Defiant, watching the tactical display as 3 human battle fleets moved into position around the Kepler sector. The Ravager force was less than 8 hours away for the first colonies, but humanity's response would be unlike anything the galaxy had seen in decades. Admiral, called Commander Marcus Webb from the tactical station. All fleet elements report ready for engagement. We have 78 combat vessels in total formation. Chin nodded, studying the 3-dimensional battle space. The Ravagers were approaching in the traditional formation that had served them well against isolated colonies and small peacekeeping forces. Three wedge-shaped attack groups designed to overwhelm defenders through sheer numbers and aggressive assault tactics. They're not expecting organized resistance, observed Captain Elena Rodriguez, commander of the heavy cruiser Vindication. Their formation assumes they'll be facing scattered defensive forces. That's their mistake, Chen replied. Commander Webb, transmit the battle plan to all fleet commanders. We're going to demonstrate why you don't threaten human colonies. The plan Chen had developed was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than trying to defend each colony individually, the human fleets would meet the Ravager force in open space, using superior technology and tactics to destroy the threat before it could reach any civilian targets. Admiral, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the lead Ravager vessel. Chen wasn't surprised. The Ravagers were probably as shocked to encounter 3 human battle fleets as the Council had been to receive humanity's ultimatum. Put them through. The main display showed a scarred reptilian being with cybernetic implants across half his face. Chen recognized the species as Krag, a violent race that had been among the first to join the Ravager coalition. Human fleet commander, the Krag growled through the translator. You are interfering with Ravager operations. Withdraw your forces immediately or face destruction. Chen couldn't help but smile. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Forces. You are approaching sovereign human territory with hostile intent. You have one opportunity to alter course and withdraw from this region. The Krag's scarred features twisted into what might have been amusement. 3 fleets of soft council species cannot stop the might of the Ravager coalition. We will sweep through your colonies like fire through paper. Soft council species? Chen repeated. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Humanity is no longer part of the Galactic Council. We handle our own security now. Human military doctrine has always been defensive, the Krag replied. You lack the will for true warfare. Chen's expression hardened. You're about to discover how wrong you are. Last chance, withdraw now, or face the consequences. The Ravager commander made a dismissive gesture and cut the transmission. Well, Chen said to her bridge crew, we tried diplomacy. Commander Webb, signal all fleets. Initiate Operation Sledgehammer. What followed was a masterclass in modern space warfare. The human fleets didn't wait for the Ravagers to reach the colonies. Instead, they accelerated directly toward the enemy formation, using their superior engine technology to control the terms of engagement. The first phase began at maximum weapons range. Human ships carried particle beam weapons that were more accurate and longer range than the plasma cannons favored by the Ravagers. As the fleets closed, the humans began picking off Ravager vessels with precise, coordinated strikes. Enemy formation is beginning to fragment, reported Commander Webb. They're trying to spread out to reduce the effectiveness of our concentrated fire. Exactly what we expected, Chen replied. Signal Second Fleet. Execute flanking maneuver Alpha. Third Fleet. Prepare for breakthrough assault. The Ravagers had superior numbers, but they were discovering that numbers alone couldn't overcome technological superiority and tactical coordination. Human ships were faster, better armed, and protected by shield systems that could absorb tremendous punishment. More importantly, human crews had trained for this exact scenario. While the Council had focused on peacekeeping and patrol duties, humanity had continued developing military doctrine based on the assumption that they might one day need to defend themselves without Council support. Admiral, called the sensor operator, I'm detecting something unusual about the Ravager ships. They're not just pirates and raiders. Some of these vessels are showing military-grade armor and weapons. Chun frowned, studying the tactical display more carefully. The sensor operator was right. Mixed in with the typical Ravager ships were vessels that looked suspiciously like military craft from several Council member species. Give me a detailed scan of those ships, she ordered. I want to know who built them. The results made Chen's blood run cold. The advanced vessels in the Ravager fleet were using technology from the Karathi Defense Forces, the Zephyrian Collective, and 2 other council member species. "Commander Webb," she called, "open a priority channel to Earth Command. I need to speak with Admiral Torres immediately." While the battle continued around them, Chun transmitted her findings back to Earth. The implications were staggering. Either the Ravagers had somehow acquired advanced military technology from council members, or council members were secretly supporting the Ravager offensive. The response from Earth came back within minutes. Continue the engagement, but capture as many Ravager vessels as possible for intelligence analysis. Chun smiled grimly. The Ravagers were about to discover that human ships carried more than just weapons. "All ships," she broadcast, "new priority. Disable rather than destroy when possible. We want prisoners and intelligence." The battle's second phase began as the human fleets closed to medium range. Here, the technological advantage became even more pronounced. Human ships carried sophisticated electronic warfare systems that could disrupt enemy communications and targeting systems. "Enemy coordination is breaking down," reported the tactical officer. "Their formation is falling apart." Chun watched as Ravager ships began firing on each other in confusion, their targeting systems compromised by human jamming technology. Several enemy vessels were dead in space, their crews struggling to restore basic ship functions. "Signal boarding teams," Chun ordered. "Prepare to secure disabled enemy vessels." The third phase was a rout. Faced with superior technology, better tactics, and coordination that was falling apart under human electronic warfare attacks, the Ravager fleet began to break and run. But Chun wasn't going to let them escape to threaten other colonies. "All fleets pursue and destroy," she ordered. "No Ravager vessel leaves this system." The pursuit lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Ravager coalition had lost 193 ships out of 200. 7 vessels had been captured intact, along with their crews. Not a single human ship had been destroyed, and casualties were minimal. More importantly, the intelligence recovered from captured Ravager vessels painted a disturbing picture of galactic politics. "Admiral," Commander Webb called as the battle reports were compiled, "you need to see this." The data from the captured ships showed detailed records of weapon shipments, technology transfers, and financial support. The Ravager coalition hadn't just acquired Council military technology. They had been systematically armed and funded by Council member species. Why would Council species support Ravager pirates? Captain Rodriguez asked. Chun studied the intelligence reports, and the pattern became clear. Because the Ravagers weren't targeting Council worlds. They were being used to pressure frontier colonies and independent systems into seeking Council protection. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Council hadn't just been incompetent at handling the Ravager threat. They had been secretly encouraging it as a method of expanding their influence and control. "Give me President Vasquez," Chun ordered. The conversation that followed was brief, but intense. President Vasquez listened to Chin's report with growing anger, then gave clear instructions. "Transmit all intelligence findings to every major power in the galaxy, including Council member species." "Ma'am," Chin asked, "are you sure about releasing this information publicly? It could destabilize the entire galactic political structure." "Admiral," Vasquez replied, "the galactic political structure has been built on a lie. The Council has been creating the very threats it claims to protect against. Every species in the galaxy deserves to know the truth." Within hours, the intelligence from the captured Ravager vessels was being broadcast across known space. The reaction was immediate and explosive. On dozens of worlds, governments that had been paying tribute to the Council for protection against Ravager raids discovered that the Council had been funding the Ravagers all along. Species that had been denied independence because of security concerns learned that those security concerns had been artificially created. The Altarian Trade Consortium was the first major power to respond, announcing immediate suspension of all Council-related activities pending a full investigation. The Crystalline Confederacy followed within hours, demanding answers from Council leadership. Even more damaging, several council member species began demanding access to their own intelligence files, wanting to know if they had unknowingly been supporting Ravager operations through council programs. Admiral Chun, came a transmission from Speaker Vorthak's office. The council urgently requests a meeting to discuss the intelligence findings. Chun smiled coldly. Tell Speaker Vorthak that Admiral Chun is no longer accepting requests from the council. If the council wishes to discuss anything with humanity, they can contact President Vasquez through normal diplomatic channels. But the implications of this intelligence are exactly what they appear to be, Chun interrupted. The council has been lying to the galaxy for decades, creating threats to justify their authority and expansion. Humanity has simply provided the evidence. As the human fleets began returning to their bases, Chun reflected on what had just occurred. In less than 24 hours, humanity had not only destroyed a major Ravager offensive, but had also exposed the corruption at the heart of galactic politics. The Ravager coalition was broken, its leadership captured or dead. But, more importantly, the myth of council benevolence and competence had been shattered beyond repair. Across the galaxy, species that had been subordinate to council authority were beginning to question that relationship. Trade alliances were shifting as governments sought alternatives to council-mediated commerce. Independent colonies were declaring their autonomy from council oversight. The political structure that had dominated known space for centuries was beginning to collapse, and humanity had lit the fuse. Ma'am, Commander Webb called from the communication station. We're receiving contact requests from 47 different governments and organizations. They all want to establish direct relationships with humanity outside the council framework. Chun nodded. Humanity's withdrawal from the council had been intended to secure their independence. But it was becoming something much larger, the catalyst for a complete reorganization of galactic civilization. The humans hadn't just walked out of the council chamber. They had walked into a position of leadership that nobody, including themselves, had expected. And, judging by the continuing stream of communication requests, the galaxy was ready to follow them into whatever came next. The age of council dominance was ending. The question now was what would replace it. Chun had a feeling that humanity would play a central role in answering that question, whether they wanted to or not. 9 months after the Ravager War, as historians were already calling it, President Elena Vasquez stood in the newly constructed International Relations Center in Geneva. Through the massive windows, she could see construction crews putting the finishing touches on what would become the headquarters of the Free Systems Alliance, a new organization that had grown from the ashes of the Galactic Council's credibility. Madam President, called Secretary of State Jennifer Morrison, approaching with a tablet full of updates. The Altarian delegation has arrived. They're requesting immediate talks about joining the alliance. Vasquez nodded, still somewhat amazed at how quickly the political landscape had shifted. The intelligence revelations about council complicity with the Ravagers had triggered a cascade of withdrawals, denunciations, and declarations of independence that had reshaped the galaxy in just half a year. How many does that make? She asked. 47 species have formally applied for alliance membership, Morrison replied. Another 23 have requested observer status, and 12 more are in preliminary discussions about trade partnerships. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, now serving as humanity's chief xenobiologist and alliance cultural advisor, joined them at the window. It's remarkable how quickly everything changed once the truth came out. The council went from representing 237 species to fewer than 60 in just 6 months. And the inner council? Still trying to maintain control, Mitchell replied. But they've lost most of their economic leverage. The Ethereals are essentially isolated now that their main trade partners have left. The Gornith are facing internal political upheaval. Even the Zephyrians are dealing with calls for government reorganization. Vasquez turned from a window to study the large holographic display showing the current political map of known space. Green areas represented alliance members or partners. Blue indicated independent systems that maintained friendly relations. Yellow showed neutral territories. And red marked the shrinking areas still under council authority. What's the latest from Speaker Vorthack? She asked. Morrison consulted her tablet. The council is calling for a grand reconciliation conference to address what they're calling recent misunderstandings and communication failures. Misunderstandings, Vasquez repeated with a bitter laugh. Is that what we're calling systematic deception and manufactured threats now? Apparently so, Mitchell said, though it's worth noting that several former council species are demanding war crimes trials for the leadership involved in the Ravager conspiracy. The door chimed, and Admiral Rebecca Torres entered, her expression grim. Madam President, she said, we have a developing situation. Long-range sensors are detecting significant military buildup in council space. It appears they're consolidating their remaining forces. Vasquez felt her stomach tighten. How significant? Approximately 3,000 vessels concentrated in 5 major fleet groups. It's the largest military mobilization we've seen since the Hegemony Wars 2 centuries ago. Are they planning to attack Alliance territories? Admiral Torres activated the room's tactical display. Unknown, but the force composition suggests offensive capability. However, there's something else. We've been monitoring council communications, and there are indications of internal conflict. Several species are apparently questioning the military buildup. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward. What kind of internal conflict? The Karathi Defense Forces have reportedly refused orders to move their fleets to the main concentration points. 3 other species have recalled their military representatives from council headquarters. And we're detecting what appears to be civil unrest on several council worlds. Vasquez studied the display showing fleet positions and political boundaries. The situation was becoming increasingly unstable, with the potential for widespread conflict if the council decided to use military force to maintain their authority. Admiral, what's our current military posture? The Alliance Defense Force has been established with contributions from 31 member species. We have approximately 1,500 vessels under unified command, plus local defense forces for individual systems. Our technology advantage remains significant, but we're still outnumbered by council forces. And our intelligence assessment of their capabilities? Admiral Torres manipulated the display to show detailed force comparisons. Mixed. Some council species have maintained advanced military technology, but many of their fleets are older designs that haven't been updated in decades. More importantly, their command structure is in chaos. Half their military leaders have resigned or been recalled by their home governments. Secretary Morrison looked up from her communications panel. Madam President, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Crystalline Confederacy. Prime Resonance Crystal Meridian wishes to address the Alliance leadership immediately. Put them through. The main display shifted to show the shimmering, geometric form of Meridian, one of the most respected leaders among the crystal beings. President Vasquez, esteemed Alliance leaders, Meridian chimed in the harmonic tones characteristic of their species. The Crystalline Confederacy brings urgent intelligence regarding Council military activities. We're listening, Vasquez replied. Our monitoring stations have detected preparations for what appears to be a coordinated military action against Alliance territories. Council forces are positioning for simultaneous strikes against key Alliance worlds and trade routes. Admiral Torres stepped forward. Prime Resonance, do you have information about timing or specific targets? The operation appears to be scheduled within the next 72 hours. Primary targets include the Altarian trade hubs, human colonial centers in the Kepler sector, and the new Alliance coordination facilities here on Earth. The room fell silent. A direct attack on Earth would be an act of unprecedented aggression, one that would likely trigger a full-scale galactic war. There is more, Meridian continued. Our intelligence suggests this operation is being conducted without the full knowledge or consent of many Council member species. It appears to be primarily driven by the inner Council leadership and their closest allies. A desperate attempt to maintain power through force, Dr. Mitchell observed. Precisely. Many Council species are unaware of the planned offensive, and would likely oppose it if they knew. President Vasquez exchanged glances with her advisors. The situation was rapidly approaching a critical decision point. Prime resonance. Does the Confederacy have the ability to warn Council species about what their leadership is planning? We have diplomatic channels with many Council members, particularly those who have been questioning recent policies. However, direct intervention in Council politics could be seen as an act of aggression, or, Admiral Torres suggested, as providing information that sovereign governments have a right to know. Vasquez made her decision. Contact every Council member species through whatever channels you have available. Inform them of the planned military action and ask for their response. Make it clear that the Alliance has no desire for war, but will defend itself and its members if attacked. Understood, President Vasquez. After the transmission ended, the room was quiet for a long moment. Madam President, Morrison said finally, what if this intelligence is wrong? What if the Council isn't planning an attack? Then, we've potentially prevented a war through transparent communication, Vasquez replied. And if the intelligence is correct, we've given reasonable Council members a chance to stop their leadership from making a catastrophic mistake. Over the next 24 hours, the galaxy held its breath. The Crystalline Confederacy's warning campaign triggered a series of emergency sessions within Council governments as species leaders learned about military operations being conducted in their names without their knowledge. The first crack in the Council's unity came from an unexpected source: the hegemony of Proxima, one of the oldest and most conservative Council members. The hegemony hereby withdraws its forces from all Council military operations pending a full investigation of leadership decisions made without proper governmental authorization, announced Proxima's military commander in a public broadcast. Within hours, similar announcements were coming from other species. The Valdorian Empire recalled its fleets. The Aquatic Collective suspended military cooperation. Even some of the mid-tier Council species began questioning orders from Council headquarters. But the inter-Council leadership wasn't giving up easily. Unknown vessels approaching Earth defense perimeter, Admiral Torres announced as alerts began sounding throughout the International Relations Center. I'm detecting 12 Dreadnought-class ships, configuration consistent with Ethereal Collective and Gornith designs. President Vasquez felt her heart racing. Are they responding to communications? Negative. They're approaching on attack vectors and powering weapon systems. Alert status across all Alliance territories, Vasquez ordered. Prepare for defensive action. But as the tension reached its peak, something unexpected happened. The attacking force suddenly broke formation, with several ships altering course away from Earth. Admiral, called the communications officer. We're receiving a transmission from one of the dreadnoughts. It's identifying itself as the Gornith vessel Crushing Victory, and they're requesting permission to approach under diplomatic flags. On the main display, the scarred carapace of a Gornith military commander appeared. Alliance leadership. The Gornith military commander rumbled, I am Fleet Commander Thorzak of the Gornith Defense Forces. I must inform you that the attack you were warned about has been canceled due to lack of support from participating species. Admiral Torres looked skeptical. Commander, our sensors show multiple vessels still on approach vectors. Those vessels represent the personal forces of inter-Council leadership, not the official military of member species. Most Council governments have withdrawn support for military action against the Alliance. President Vasquez stepped forward. Commander Thorzak, what is the current situation within Council space? Chaos. President Vasquez. When member species learned that military action was being planned without their knowledge, many governments recalled their forces and began demanding answers. Speaker Vorthak and the Inter-Council are essentially governing a few dozen worlds instead of a galactic civilization. And the remaining attack force? Approximately 50 vessels, mostly from ethereal and Inter-Council worlds. They lack the support for a sustained campaign, but they may attempt symbolic strikes to demonstrate strength. Over the following hours, the situation continued to evolve rapidly. The warning campaign had not only prevented a major conflict, but had triggered the final collapse of Council authority. Species after species announced their withdrawal from Council membership, until only the inner Council worlds and their closest allies remained. The symbolic strikes that Commander Thorzak had warned about never materialized. Faced with the reality that they no longer commanded a galactic empire, the inner Council leadership began negotiating for their own political survival rather than planning military adventures. 3 days later, President Vasquez received a formal communication from Speaker Vorthak requesting talks about transitioning to a new galactic political structure. "It's over," she announced to her assembled advisors. "The Galactic Council as a governing institution has effectively ceased to exist." "What happens now?" asked Dr. Mitchell. Vasquez looked out the window at the construction crews working on the Alliance headquarters. "Now we build something better. A voluntary association of sovereign species based on mutual respect and cooperation rather than imposed hierarchy." Secretary Morrison consulted her tablet. "We have 89 species requesting alliance membership or partnership agreements. The applications are coming in faster than we can process them." "And the former Council territories?" Admiral Torres activated the political display. "Most are organizing into regional federations or independent alliances. The Karathi are leading something called the Frontier Defense League. The Valdorians are organizing the Rim Worlds Confederation. Even the Zephyrians are working on a new democratic federation. No single galactic government. It appears the galaxy has decided that was the problem," Dr. Mitchell observed. "Too much power concentrated in too few hands." President Vasquez nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction mixed with apprehension. Humanity's walkout from the Council chamber 6 months ago had been intended to secure their independence, but it had instead triggered the transformation of galactic civilization itself. "The question now," she said, "is whether we can help build a galaxy where such concentrations of unaccountable power can't develop again." Through the window, she could see representatives from dozens of species arriving for the founding conference of the Free Systems Alliance. Species that had been enemies under Council rule were now working together to establish new frameworks for cooperation and mutual defense. The humans had walked out on the Galactic Council, and in doing so, they had walked into a position of leadership in creating whatever came next. The panic that had followed humanity's withdrawal had given way to something unexpected: hope for a better, more equitable galaxy. And as President Vasquez prepared to address the founding conference of the Free Systems Alliance, she reflected that sometimes the best way to fix a broken system wasn't to reform it, but to walk away and build something entirely new. The universe had learned that when humans walked away, they didn't just leave. They created alternatives that made everyone else want to follow. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of galactic cooperation was just beginning. And it had all started with one word: no.